Welcome back to Faith and Hope, where we explore the intense historical stories between Christianity and Islam. This topic has never lost its relevance throughout history, with bloody conflicts and countless sacrifices. To understand it better, let us travel back to the 11th century, a period when the confrontation between these two religions reached its peak. Blood, tears, and the lives of believers on both sides were lost, and the simmering tension that had built up over hundreds of years ignited a fire of war that could erupt at any moment. What was bound to happen eventually did. Irreconcilable conflicts plunged both Christianity and Islam into a chaotic period lasting 200 years, beginning with the First Crusades in 1095. However, few know that these crusades might never have happened if it weren't for a shocking event that rocked the Christian world in the West and all of Europe. This event, often described as the straw that broke the camel's back, set off 200 years of continuous conflict between the two religions. This pivotal moment was the humiliating defeat of the Eastern Roman Empire at the hands of the Islamic Empire of the Turks, where the Byzantine emperor was captured as a prisoner of war. One of the decisive battles for the Turkish advance was the victory at the Battle of Manzikert. So do you wonder how this battle, considered the spark for the unavoidable conflict between Christianity and Islam, unfolded? And how did it impact the Crusaders' decision to embark on their expeditions? Join Faith and Hope as we explore these questions in depth. The Eastern Roman Empire was once one of the most powerful and flourishing nations of the Middle Ages, with vast territories and a pinnacle of cultural civilization. Although this empire officially lasted until the 15th century, signs of decline began appearing as early as the 11th century. This was a gradual but turbulent process, marked by political and military upheavals that caused the empire's glory to gradually fade. This decline became evident under Emperor Constantine IX's reign. A man passionate about philosophy and theology, Constantine IX devoted much of his efforts to cultural and religious matters, but lacked effective military governance skills, which had significant consequences. Key territories in Italy fell into Norman hands, while the empire's eastern regions faced severe threats from the rising Seljuk Islamic Empire. The Eastern Roman Empire, once the steadfast stronghold of Christianity, began to waver before Seljuk's ambitious growth. After Constantine IX's death, Constantine X ascended the throne, determined to restore the empire's strength. However, despite his enthusiasm for reform, his policies did not yield real effectiveness, and the situation grew even more tense. The Eastern Roman Empire faced a new threat from the east as the Seljuk forces continually expanded their territory. In the struggle to control Ani, a key Armenian capital near today's Turkey border, the Eastern Roman army, although well-equipped and experienced, struggled against the fierce and determined Seljuk warriors. Unable to withstand the pressure, Constantine X was forced to sign a peace treaty in 1064 to temporarily halt the conflict. However, this short-lived peace was soon broken when, only a few months later, the Seljuks captured Ani, leading to a series of victories that placed the Eastern Roman Empire in an unprecedentedly weak position. Losing Ani, a significant cultural and economic center, was not only a territorial loss, but also a major blow to the people's faith in the empire's strength. The Eastern Roman Empire, once renowned for its glorious victories, now faced repeated defeats at the hands of the Turks. This weakening signaled not only an erosion of power, but also the beginning of a dark and turbulent era in European and Middle Eastern history. In 1068, Emperor Romanos IV ascended the throne with a powerful ambition to restore and bring the Eastern Roman Empire back to its former glory. Shortly after his accession, he swiftly launched a series of military reforms to strengthen and rebuild the forces. These reform efforts soon produced positive results as the Eastern Roman army, under Romanos IV's leadership, achieved several victories against Seljuk attacks. In a major campaign, Romanos IV's army recaptured Philomeleion, a strategic fortress near Aleppo, Syria, leaving the Seljuk forces bewildered and with diminished initial confidence. However, Romanos IV's journey to restore the empire still faced numerous challenges. In a significant campaign to repel the Islamic forces, the Eastern Roman army clashed with the strong counterattack from the Seljuk under the command of Sultan Alp Arslan, a brilliant and strategic leader. This confrontation ended in defeat for Romanos IV, forcing him to seek peace negotiations. Surprisingly, despite his victory, Alp Arslan did not seize the opportunity to advance deep into Eastern Roman territory. Instead, he actively proposed a truce, a decision that astonished many at the time and in later years. The reason behind this unusual decision may have stemmed from the internal tensions within the Islamic world that Alp Arslan was dealing with, particularly conflicts with the Fatimid dynasty in Western Asia and North Africa. The Fatimids posed a formidable and genuine threat to Seljuk stability, making Alp Arslan carefully consider his resources and focus. Temporarily holding a truce with the Eastern Roman Empire allowed him to concentrate all his forces on confronting the Fatimid dynasty, with the hope that if he defeated the Fatimids, he could later return and easily handle the Eastern Roman Empire. On the other hand, if he risked facing the Eastern Roman Empire at that moment, Alp Arslan would have faced the risk of dividing his strength between two fronts, defending against the Christian forces in the west, while also addressing threats from the Fatimids in the south. This would have been an unfavorable and dangerous position, potentially weakening Seljuk forces and preventing them from achieving easy victories. Carefully considering these multidimensional challenges, Alp Arslan made a wise, strategic decision, allowing the Seljuks to maintain their strength during a time of turmoil. Once again, the story of power struggles among medieval kings and emperors left a lasting mark on the flow of history. Conquering the Eastern Roman Empire was never Sultan Alp Arslan's top priority. In his view, the empire was not an urgent threat, but rather a target to consider when the time was right. Alp Arslan believed that, once ready, he could easily move westward and threaten the entire Eastern Roman territory. However, on the opposing side, Emperor Romanos IV was no easy opponent to subdue. With a desire to restore the empire, Romanos devised a bold plan in early 1071. Romanos IV sent envoys to Sultan Alp Arslan to propose an extension of the peace treaty signed in 1069. This was a diversion, masking his true intent to create an opportunity for a conquest. At the time, Alp Arslan was embroiled in conflicts in the south with the Fatimid dynasty and saw the treaty extension as a wise move. Given the intense tensions within the Islamic world across West Asia and North Africa, he needed to focus his forces on dealing with the Fatimids, who he considered the real threat. He agreed to extend the treaty, confident it would secure the northern front, allowing him to concentrate on his southern campaign. However, the Sultan was unaware that he had fallen into the Eastern Roman Emperor's elaborate deception. With the treaty renewed, Romanos IV swiftly gathered his forces for a large-scale expedition. Determined to reclaim strategic fortresses lost to the Seljuks, he personally led an army across Asia Minor. This Eastern Roman force was formidable, numbering between 40,000 and 70,000 soldiers, a number sufficient to strike fear into any stronghold. Supported by Norman allies and Georgian forces, the Eastern Roman army marched through Asia Minor's treacherous territories, aiming for strategic fortresses and preparing to confront the Seljuk forces if necessary. However, traversing Asia Minor was no easy feat. The harsh terrain, combined with the arid climate, made it extremely challenging to transport food and supplies. Additionally, the Eastern Roman army faced numerous skirmishes with local inhabitants, leading to significant resource losses and a decline in morale. The Franks, an important ally on this expedition, could not endure the hardships and withdrew, weakening Romanos IV's forces. After weeks of exhausting travel, the Eastern Roman army finally reached the region of Malazgirt, also known as Manzikert, in what is now northern Turkey. Here, amidst arid plains, Romanos IV believed he had an opportunity to restore Eastern Roman glory. He promptly set up defensive positions and convened an urgent strategy meeting to discuss the Seljuk attack plan. The generals were divided into two opposing views. One group believed this was the ideal time for a surprise assault on Seljuk territory, assuming Sultan Alp Arslan was still occupied with conflicts far away and unable to return to defend his lands. However, Other generals argued that the army needed rest after a long journey to prepare for a prolonged campaign. The debate was heated, but Romanos IV ultimately decided to attack immediately, hoping to reclaim the strategic fortresses before the Seljuk forces could react. Believing Alp Arslan was still far away, Romanos IV led his troops to Lake Van, the largest lake in Turkey to the east, and planned to capture nearby fortresses. Unexpectedly, his plan unraveled completely when Alp Arslan received news of the Eastern Roman army advancing into his territory. The Seljuk Sultan promptly decided to abandon his southern campaign and hurriedly returned. He gathered a formidable force of around 30,000 soldiers from allies in Aleppo and Mosul and advanced toward Malazgirt to confront Romanos IV's forces. With intelligence on the Eastern Roman army's exact location, Alp Arslan held a significant advantage, while Romanos IV remained unaware that the Seljuk forces had regrouped and were closing in. To boost his soldiers' morale, Sultan Alp Arslan donned white robes, a color symbolizing mourning in Islamic tradition, representing a willingness to die. Before thousands of soldiers, he gave an impassioned speech, stirring enthusiasm and urging them to fight for their homeland and faith, ready to sacrifice for their beliefs. With a determined spirit, Alp Arslan swiftly moved his forces toward Manzikert, anticipated to be the battleground for the decisive clash with the Eastern Roman army. Initial skirmishes between the Eastern Roman vanguard and Seljuk troops resulted unfavorably for the Romans. However, Romanos IV still underestimated the enemy's full strength and continued advancing with a sense of overconfidence, ignoring clear signs of an impending threat. Sensing the advancing Eastern Roman forces, Alp Arslan immediately deployed small-scale attacks, employing guerrilla tactics to weaken their morale and combat capability. These surprise assaults inflicted significant losses on the Eastern Roman troops, gradually disrupting their formation. The following day, an Eastern Roman patrol discovered Seljuk troop traces and hastily retreated to report the findings. Despite the warning, Romanos IV assumed this was only an advance unit and underestimated the threat. This complacency put the entire Eastern Roman army in a vulnerable position. Tragically, what Romanos IV deemed a minor force was actually the Seljuk main army. The reconnaissance team he had sent out was entirely captured, leaving no one to report back. In an emergency, Romanos IV had to reorganize his defense, but the element of surprise was lost, and his soldiers' morale began to waver. Alp Arslan seized the opportunity, orchestrating continuous assaults, pushing the Eastern Roman army into disarray. The Islamic cavalry, with their impressive speed and agility, swiftly closed in and attacked the Eastern Roman forces from all directions, preventing Romanos IV from organizing an effective defense. At key positions, the Eastern Roman Expeditionary Army was divided, disrupted, and forced to withdraw further into defensive positions. Alp Arslan's initial powerful assault quickly achieved success, boosting the morale of the entire Islamic army. Sultan's troops grew increasingly confident, optimistic that total victory was only a matter of time. Unexpectedly, following this initial victory, Alp Arslan sent emissaries to the Eastern Roman camp to propose peace negotiations. This rare offer of peace presented an opportunity, but Romanos IV was no longer interested. To him, the recent defeat was merely a temporary setback, and he was fully convinced that with his current forces, he could reverse the situation, reclaim victory, and restore the empire's glory. In his confidence and determination, Romanos IV rejected Alp Arslan's offer. Betting everything on the upcoming battle, he rallied his forces to prepare for a major counterattack aimed at crushing the Islamic army. Just one day after rejecting the peace offer, Romanos IV ordered his forces to form ranks. He divided the army into three wings. Alepsios commanded the left flank, Romanos IV himself led the central forces, and Andronikos Doukas held the reserve position at the rear. With high spirits, the Eastern Roman soldiers marched closer to the Seljuk positions. On the Seljuk side, Alp Arslan quickly grasped the situation and arranged his troops in a crescent formation, a familiar tactic that had brought success to Islamic forces in the past. As the Eastern Roman army advanced toward the center of the crescent formation, the Seljuk forces continued to withdraw, maintaining distance, while launching rapid and unexpected counterattacks. Meanwhile, the two Seljuk wings gradually moved forward, encircling and pressing the Eastern Romans into a deadly pincer movement. Despite the fierce Seljuk assault, the Eastern Romans resisted tenaciously. Armored in heavy gear, they could withstand the initial assaults from the Islamic cavalry. However, the Seljuk archers did not allow them to advance any further. Seljuk archers unleashed volleys of arrows like rain, tearing through the Eastern Roman ranks and causing significant losses. The continuous rain of arrows halted the Eastern Roman advance, forcing them to retreat, creating opportunities for the Islamic cavalry to close in. The Seljuk cavalry, wielding sharp swords, cut through the Eastern Roman lines, inflicting heavy casualties. Nevertheless, the Eastern Romans were not easily subdued. By the afternoon, they launched a fierce counterattack and managed to capture a Seljuk camp. This small victory held significant morale value, rekindling hope among the Eastern Roman soldiers. The battlefield at Manzikert grew more intense than ever as both armies recognized the impending decisive clash. Each soldier understood that this was a battle in which both sides had wagered everything, a battle that could determine the fate of both the Eastern Roman Empire and the Seljuk Empire in the coming years. The battle at Manzikert continued with unprecedented ferocity. The Seljuk forces, using their excellent strategy and agility, maintained a tight encirclement. The Eastern Romans fought with resilient determination, despite heavy casualties, as the entire battlefield was engulfed in smoke, shouts, and the resounding echo of relentless assaults. This battle was not merely a confrontation, but a final test of honor, loyalty, and bravery for the soldiers determined to fight to the end for their empire. As both sides had barely rested after a long day of battle, the Islamic forces under Alp Arslan's command launched another fierce attack using archers, targeting the weakened Eastern Roman flanks from the previous fight. The two Eastern Roman flanks, which had already lost their defensive stability, could not withstand the onslaught of arrows and quickly collapsed in panic. The central force, elite armored knights, still pursued the Islamic forces, but they were caught in Seljuk's familiar hit-and-run tactics, putting them at a disadvantage without an effective counterattack. The pressure mounted on Emperor Romanos IV, forcing him to order a retreat to prevent further losses as nightfall approached. However, poor coordination led one Eastern Roman flank to misinterpret the order and continue the attack, causing chaos. To make matters worse, Andronikos Doukas, the reserve commander, unilaterally withdrew without supporting Romanos IV, leaving the Eastern Roman formation vulnerable. Sensing the opportunity, Alp Arslan launched successive waves of attacks, deepening the Eastern Roman forces' confusion and trapping them in a hopeless position. Some accounts suggest that the Artemidios forces attempted to escape when they realized victory was impossible, while other sources claim they fought bravely to the end. Romanos IV, moved by the loyalty and bravery of his soldiers, promised rewards if they could reclaim victory. Yet, all these efforts could not change the outcome. The final battle ended in a devastating defeat for the Eastern Roman army, which was completely surrounded, and Emperor Romanos IV was captured. The surviving soldiers fled across the fields, but most were hunted down and killed by Seljuk forces under the cover of night. By dawn, nearly the entire Eastern Roman army had been destroyed. Alp Arslan, as the victor, confronted Romanos IV, who stood battered, bloodied, and humiliated as a defeated prisoner. Initially, the Sultan did not believe the disheveled, miserable man before him was the Eastern Roman emperor. Upon verifying his true identity, Alp Arslan performed a symbolic act, placing his foot on Romanos's neck and forcing him to kiss the ground, symbolizing his humiliation and defeat. However, after satisfying his desire for symbolic revenge, Alp Arslan displayed generosity and treated the Eastern Roman emperor with respect. Romanos IV was held captive for 8 days and then released in exchange for a large ransom and a commitment of annual tribute to the Seljuk Empire. Though there was no massacre following the victory, the defeat at Manzikert became a strategic disaster for the Eastern Roman Empire. This battle was not only a military defeat, but also a critical blow to the empire's reputation, leading them to lose control over much of the central eastern Anatolia region. This marked the beginning of a prolonged, irreversible decline for the Eastern Roman Empire. Just a decade after this painful defeat, The Eastern Roman Empire had contracted to include only the Balkan region and a small part of northwest Asia Minor. Facing an increasing threat from the Islamic world, the Eastern Roman Emperor was forced to seek assistance from the Roman Pope, marking the beginning of the First Crusade. So, what are your thoughts on the Battle of Manzikert? Was this an inevitable turning point in the Eastern Roman Empire's history? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more captivating historical stories. Thank you, and see you in our next historical tale.